Hello all, Rick here. The Borg are known for sweeping across the Milky Way, assimilating almost everything in their path. This is how they absorb new innovations, technologies, plans and replicatable biological traits, enhancing their own abilities with the goal of reaching that elusive perfection. So this is a list of every species in canon that the Borg have assimilated, and what it is they probably got out of it. First, a couple of disclaimers. I'm not going to cover species that have had run-ins with the Borg and lost a couple of ships, unless it seems like it may have supplied a major development in some way. Any technology of a certain level is of interest to them, as they do not innovate by themselves. So, for example, just because a Talaxian freighter was assimilated, I'm not going to add Talaxians to this list. For the most part, the Talaxian species continues on as a whole. So, for the first section, I'm looking at people who were almost entirely eradicated, assimilated or destroyed by the Borg. Beginning with Arcturus's people. This species was very advanced when it came to their ability to perform mathematics and linguistics, with a single individual able to learn over 4,000 languages in days. The Borg came for them after becoming aware of their advanced technology, chief among their innovations quantum slipstream drive and particle synthesis. This was a warp alternative that was even faster, and the ability for a ship to reshape and reform itself with replicated technology. Designated Species 116, the Borg must have enacted a protracted campaign against them considering their early designation, until in 2374 all but 20,000 were assimilated. This means that the Borg do indeed have slipstream drive, they just have better alternatives too. Next up, the Sicarian. Now, to be fair, we don't know if it was the entire people, but considering the Borg now possess spatial trajector technology, a form of hypertransporter that can cover thousands of light years, it is likely that they have seized at least one colony planet, and until we hear otherwise, I'm going to assume that was Sikaris itself, as that is the only place we know of where they could have acquired it. The Brunali people. Icheb's species had the unfortunate chance to be located right nearby to a Borg transwarp corridor, and their world was constantly attacked. However, they took great pains to minimise their technological footprint, insulating and hiding everything to avoid attracting attention. But even so, the Borg would still occasionally swing by to grab some individuals to use as drones, or when they detected signs of higher tech prowess. Eventually, however, the Borg learned of the Brunali's advanced genetic engineering abilities. While the Brunali still exist, their civilization is constantly assailed and their development stunted indefinitely for fear of attracting the Borg. The El-Orians were encountered in 2293, still dispersed and fleeing the Borg, which had assimilated their homeworld in the mid-23rd century. While it is unclear what their level of advancement was, the El-Orians did possess the intrinsic ability to sense the flow of time that superseded dimensions. They could sense changes and alternate existences. This too is supposedly an ability that the Queen of the Borg maintains, so perhaps the El-Orian assimilation allowed them to inherit this trait. What is for certain is that there are an unknown number of El-Orians left, scattered by the attack. The Kaitati lost all except 27 evacuation ships to the Borg. The only real development that we know of that they possessed was the ability to replicate certain elements which they lost to the Borg attack. It's possible that the Borg refined their replicator abilities through assimilating them. The Sakari were a cave-dwelling people who had been driven into living underground in the Nekrit expanse to hide from the Borg. The only survivors of the Sakari were those that the Borg had failed to find, but it is unknown what developments they possessed before. But now their entire focus seems to be on stealth technology, but that came after. On top of these known species, we have a series that have been lost to time due to the total or near total assimilation. All that is known is their Borg designation as well as the abilities gleaned by them. Species 149 had a technology to reverse cell decay that could be used to restore a damaged drone up to 73 hours after it had perished through nanoprobe and neuroelectric isopulses. Species 259 were consumed for their autonomous regeneration sequences, allowing a vessel to replicate and install components that are removed instantly. Species 262 and 263 were seized concerning their legends and knowledge of the Omega molecule, something that the Borg perceived as the perfect energy source. Species 312 created tetrion-based tech barriers that the Borg found difficult to deal with. While we don't see them, we see the remnants of their work on the planet Lidos. Species 6339, possibly called the Octanti, saw 11 billion taken. We don't know what for, but their ships were heavily armed with good phaser tech. And finally, Species 10026, possibly the Kitarian, not to be confused with the Qatarian. At least 392,000 people, which was the entire populace of their homeworld, and they possessed modulating phaser pulses that pierced Borg shielding. Well, not anymore. Then there are a handful of species that the Borg have routinely clashed with and assimilated enough of that they have reaped great rewards from their encounters despite the species still continuing on. First among these are humans, which I'll use to segue into another point, that if a Borg grabs an individual, they don't suddenly learn every human innovation up until that point, of course. They only get what that individual knew, but they've assimilated enough human colonies and ships to glean a great understanding of a myriad of Federation technologies, which themselves are often a harmonic blend of multiple species' innovations. Imagine how much more efficient it has made the Borg at integrating their new acquisitions. I might do a video covering on what happens when Starfleet loses a vessel to the Borg. Let me know if that would be of interest. Secondly are the Romulans. Now, we don't see a lot of it, but it is implied that the Romulans have been dealing with the Borg for as long as, if not longer, than Starfleet. So encryption, stealth tech and much in the way of cyber warfare would have been absorbed into the collective from this secretive species. Not to mention their black hole warp drive tech, cloaking devices and more. We have also seen Hirogen in the Borg, and even one Hirogen hunter would have given them insight into their weaponry and armour, which can withstand the gravitational stress of a neutron star's surface. Yes, Hirogen armour is overpowered, and the Borg have at least one suit to study. Likewise, we see that the Krenim are among the drones, and they are known for their temporal technologies, well, at least a segment are. It could be that the Borg continued to refine their time travel abilities from the Krenim they seized. The Vidians, too, have lost members to the Borg, and given that half their population has been forced to learn advanced medical science for numerous species, the chances are high that the Borg furthered their understanding of biological integration of new tech into the collective. The Hazari were noted for their tactical minds and potential to make good combat drones, plus they had the mental resistance to psionics. And the Pelians developed an energy source from the magnetic fields of planets. The last one I want to mention is the Voth, who were so much more advanced than Starfleet when encountered. However, they remain staunchly apart from the Borg, and you don't get to be one of the oldest species in the Delta Quadrant. Sorry, the oldest species, forgive my heresy, by not being able to contend with the Borg. That being said, the Borg did get their transwarp from somewhere, and when not using their corridor network, the Borg transwarp looks a lot like the Voths. Finally, I thought I'd throw in some apocryphally named species. The Ankari developed low-profile warp technology that was hard to detect, and this species is canon, but instances of their assimilation are not. It would still be of interest to the Borg, though. Species 1429 is said to have had a personal time travel technology that the collective seized for their use as escape functionality for their queens. And two more of interest are the Nerisians, who the Borg actually gave technology to. This was in the hopes that they would develop it naturally over time, and then the Borg could return and claim the resulting development. It did not work out for anyone involved. and Species 874, who did not allow assimilation. They chose to opt out of existence in their entirety rather than be assimilated. So another species that the Borg wiped out, even if it was technically by their own hand. Many individual ships and colonies too have been assimilated, pockets of species here and there, and while many others were taken in their entirety, we know nothing about them, lost as they are to the Borg, even their names replaced with designations. Species 125, for example, made excellent handlers of the hive mind, making them ideal queens, but we know nothing more about them, their history, culture, and technology lost into the collective hive mind of the cyborg threat. Clearly, the majority of the Borg's abilities came from this vast bulk of opportunistic and lost history, but uncovering it all is impossible while the collective remains the hostile, all-consuming force that it is. Everything you see the Borg do likely stemmed from one of the over 10,000 species the Borg has conflicted with, and they mix and match it all into their ships, software, organics, and drones where they can, even maintaining entire species for designated roles within the collective like 125 for the Queens, or the Hazaria's tactical drones, using their individual traits to their benefit. Thanks for watching this breakdown on all the known species of the Borg. I have been Resistance is Futile, I mean Rick. Until the next one, goodbye.